Political violence continues unabated in KwaZulu-Natal. In an effort to find solutions, the former provincial government commissioned an inquiry headed by former Judge Marumo Moerane to find answers. Witnesses, including politicians, academics and community activists, gave evidence. Vanessa Burger is one of those community activists who testified. She joins us now for this discussion on political killings. Vanessa, thank you very much for your time this Saturday afternoon. So the Commission started its work officially in October 2016, and it ran for 2 years, finishing its work in February 2018. Can you tell us, were you hopeful at the time that the Commission would deal decisively with political killings in KZN?
No, not at all. Our commissions have a history of failing to actually enact anything that is really useful. So I wasn't hopeful at all.
And that's exactly what, sorry to interrupt you, that's exactly what we've seen play out in the last 3 years. It doesn't seem that much has changed. What are your observations of the situation at the moment?
Well, let's be clear on two things. Firstly, political killings are not something that has ever gone away. It's with us. It's been with us all the time. It does increase around election time, definitely. But since the last elections, according to my figures, which includes a broader definition of what makes a political killing, it's remained constant at around 35 victims a year. So this is shockingly high for a so-called democracy. It's very worrying. And it looks like the numbers are probably rising again. But the actual definition of what makes a political killing is also problematic, because it places the value on the lives of politicians and results in more resources being thrown at the problem. Then it is still ultimately political failure, whether it's a mining-related killing, because the government is not doing its job enforcing public participation, or whether it's the killing of whistleblowers because the state has created this political climate that allows or even encourages this type of murder, or whether it's people killed by the police. It's still political because the state is allowing that to happen. So it's all part of a broader problem, and it should be viewed as that. It shouldn't be separated out, actually, in my view.
Vanessa, so, while it's important not to discount certain types of killings, let's focus our view a little bit more towards the types of political killings where hopeful political candidates eyeing financially beneficial positions and possibly access to tenders amounting to millions, where they have competition taken out specifically by hitmen. We've seen that happening so often in KZN. What's the situation like at the moment?
Well, it's very tense. Particularly in the poorer communities, it's very, very tense. I work a lot with the hospitals, and in some cases, the Hayes Hospital, for example, there's a lot of contestation there. And the community is basically shutting down. They've gone quiet. No one wants to talk now. No one wants to speak out. It's a sign of broader political failure. And it's very worrying because it shows that we are heading towards becoming a failed state, where we cannot call ourselves a democracy. Where votes are traded in tenders, food parcels or bullets. This is not a democracy. So, the ruling party has actually become sort of the biggest crime syndicate in the country. Political patronage has displaced any pretense of public service. So all of this is encouraged by poverty, economic desperation, unemployment. Like you say, where we have a situation where a councillor will kill off the opposition to hang on to his job, maintain control over tenders, because if he fails, he's likely to slip back into poverty. Also, jobs. There's very little opportunity for people who don't have skills. You go into politics, you become a tenderpreneur, become a labourer, or you become a hitman. So these are all very, very big problems that we're facing here. Also, we are filled with guns. There's the old armed cases, there's police guns, which are never really, there's been very little will to recover any of that lot.
Vanessa, I want to bring in our senior reporter Siphamandla Goge into this discussion. He's based in KZN and he sees a lot of this playing out while reporting. Siphamandla, many years ago we saw violence, political violence in KZN, specifically in the contestation between the IFP and the ANC. That's no longer the case. Now we're seeing more inter-party contestation, yet the violence remains. We haven't seen that while there are isolated incidents. We haven't seen the kind of level of political violence and political killings in other parts of the country. Why is it so concentrated in KZN?
Sure, it's a difficult question to answer, but yet simple. I can tell you that, you need to just rewind a bit. Yes, you have mentioned that earlier on in the 80s and during the struggle, there was political violence between the IFP and the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal. But of late, we are seeing that most leaders and activists who are being killed are members of the governing African National Congress. Perhaps if we take our viewers back a little bit, from 2011, we saw some members of the NFP being killed, a few members of the IFP. But in 2016, we started to see this trend emerging whereby it's been narrowed down to being members of the governing African National Congress. And it boils down to two things, really. One is the capacity of the state, or lack of it thereof, to deal decisively with these political killings. I know Police Minister General Begicele assembled a team of police officers from across the country that will investigate political killings in KwaZulu-Natal. But as long as you do not arrest and convict the big fish, you arrest trigger pullers or hitmen, you will not solve the problem, because the problem lies with those who plot to kill their fellow comrades. And what we have been seeing in KwaZulu-Natal, there is very little success rate in terms of arresting those who are plotters. I'm talking about high-profile leaders in this case. So as long as you do not deal with that, you will not be able to solve the problem of political killings in KwaZulu-Natal. But also, as long as you do not address this competition of positions and business opportunities in the ANC or within the ANC, you will not be able to deal or solve the issue of political killings in KwaZulu-Natal. According to the Moerane Commission of Inquiry investigating political killings in KwaZulu-Natal, two things stood out there. Is the issue of job opportunities and also business interests. So if you don't deal decisively with those competing issues, you will not be able to solve the problem. But most importantly, if you do not eradicate the hitman industry in KwaZulu-Natal, you will continue to see these political killings. This is a heavily armed province which is thriving in terms of the hitman industry. As long as the state is unable to make inroads in eradicating the hitman industry and arresting big fish and plotters, you will not deal with it. So it's a really broad kind of a situation, but you can narrow it down to those competing interests, the issue of jobs and business interests, but also the thriving of the hitman industry and being unable to arrest those who are in power who plan to commit these matters.
Siphamandla, I'm going to come back with you in a moment when we speak to a whistleblower. For now, I want to chat to you again, Vanessa, and get your take on the provincial task team that was set up to make progress in terms of eradicating political killings. There has seemingly been little progress made, even though Police Minister Begicele tells us all the numbers. He says so many cases, these are the arrests that have been made, these are the dockets that have been handed off, these are the people serving time in jail, yet the problem continues. What's your take on that?
Well, it's the same as your reporter said. The focus has been on taking out the hitmen. They are not the problem. They are only the tools. There's no political will to deal with the big guys behind the scenes who are calling the shots. So until that happens, we are not going to have much success here. Also, you mentioned just now about the violence between IFP and the UDF and the ANC and then later on the NFP. The violence during the 80s, 90s, a lot of the people who were doing those killings or involved in orchestrating those killings behind them, they were assimilated into national governments and provincial governments. or business interests, and became very powerful, or into the police even. So that culture has remained. It's never been addressed. So that is also a problem.
Vanessa, you talk about the big names. If we don't take out the political people who are targeting and having their opposition or their competition killed, we're not going to make progress. These big names, are those names known to the police in KZN? And what's stopping police from making arrests at that level?
Well, look, we heard recently, there were reports, I think it was News 24, of crime intelligence involvement in the murder of Thabiso Zulu. Now, whoever ordered that hit was obviously known. Now, there appears to have been an instruction, according to that those media articles, that came directly from the police minister to stop investigating the police officers who were involved in that. Now, obviously, those police officers who were involved in the crime intelligence hit behind the hit that eventually led to Thabiso's death. Obviously, he must have known who was responsible and tried to shut down the investigation, if all of this is true. So, yes, if we have that kind of thing happening right from the very top, from the Minister of Police, then, yeah, it's a big problem.
Thank you very much for speaking to us. We're going to leave it there with you. Community activist Vanessa Burger speaking to us there. She testified at the Moerane Commission of Inquiry into Political Killings in KZN. Let's bring in now whistleblower and anti-corruption activist Thabiso Zulu. He says whistleblowers are no longer being killed by gangsters or corrupt politicians, but rather by the state. He joins us for more. Thabiso, welcome, and thank you very much for talking to us this afternoon. So tell us what you mean by that whistleblowers are now being killed by the state. Can you elaborate?
Good afternoon, Andy, and good afternoon to the viewers. I mean just that. As Ms. Burger has just narrated, that there have been reports of the involvement of crime intelligence operatives in the murder of my late friend, Comrade Thabiso Zulu. I've also been subjected to the very same the persecution. You remember that I was shot on the 26th of October 2019. Among the people that I recognized during that fateful night was a policeman, among the people that were shooting at me. The other thing that we are aware of, the public must be aware now that 7 police members that descended on my home on the 29th of July last year, broke the doors, beat me up, beat the heavily pregnant neighbor, threatened my mother with rape, have since been charged by the provincial management of police. So it shows right now we're aware there is a certain crime intelligence officer who is based in Pietermaritzburg. His name is in public. I've been naming him because I say if he feels that I'm defending him, he must go to court. It's there. There is a report that was conducted, the investigation that was conducted. There is a report that we're waiting for to be released, where he is the one who has been behind this persecution of mine, working with the corrupt, dirty and rough politicians.
Thabiso, you mentioned crime intelligence, and that immediately takes me back to the looting and violence that occurred in July. We've seen a lot of tension in KZN over the past couple of months. There are fears that tensions are going to boil over and that we can expect to see an escalation of politically motivated killings in the run-up to the local government elections. What's your assessment of the feeling on the ground?
The feeling, it's not only a feeling, it's an observation, a clear observation. On Saturday, this past Saturday, Mlungi Sizondi, who is an eyewitness in my shooting, the only eyewitness that I have in the world, who was with me when I was shot by those would-be assassins. A person who is also a witness in a fraud and a corruption case against the candidate of the ANC in the upcoming local government election, who is currently a councillor, was stabbed in a community meeting which was meant to elect a candidate who was going to contest the election on behalf of the ANC. He was stabbed in front of the police. The police did not disarm the assassin, the would-be assassin. The police did not even arrest the person. So it shows you exactly that it's not only a feeling, it's an observation. It's what is happening on the ground. Witnesses are being stabbed in front of the police. Witnesses and whistleblowers, because he whistleblew in the municipality, exposing corruption that was taking place at the local municipality in Pietermaritzburg. He was stabbed, he was admitted in hospital. Up until today, there have been no threat assessment that had been done to him. We had to move him after he came out of hospital, take him elsewhere so that he was going to hide because he fears for his life. That's how serious, that's how difficult, that's how desperate the situation is on the ground.
Siphamandla, I want to bring you back into the conversation here and speak specifically about the recent deaths in Nanda, where 5 gunmen, allegedly on the back of a bakkie, opened fire on people gathered outside a political meeting. We saw 3 women lose their lives there. No doubt that was not targeted killings of specific people, but rather a part of this broader theme of intimidation, of threats, of keeping people in check. What else have you seen in the province in recent months to allude to the same kind of intimidation leading up to the local elections?
No, it's a reality that community activists, community members and politicians are really scared in KwaZulu-Natal. If you will have criminals who are brazen, who will just drive up and open fire when people are gathering to exercise their democratic right and nothing happens afterwards, to lose 3 lives of people who had attended a community meeting to exercise their democratic right, that tells you that it instills fear, and you are likely not going to have many community members from that ward coming forward to participate in any political activity, because if you will be gunned down attending a community meeting, it may well be that the target was not hit during that shooting, but the message was sent, and as we speak, sadly, people lost their lives. So in KwaZulu-Natal, there is that reality. People are scared, community members are scared, because you don't know what will happen. As I'm doing this live interview, I was just somewhere else where I interacted with a current serving councillor who told me that before it gets dark, he needs to get home because he fears for his life. There is this heightened tension in the province, and he says as he was conducting his political activity during the voter registration weekend, but he has to limit his movements because he fears for his life. But also, let's go back to the point about this political task team that was set up by the Police Minister General Begicele to investigate political killings in KwaZulu-Natal. There is another interesting observation that is not widely reported. In most of these political killings cases, you would see that either way, one or more accused persons are either former members of the police or current serving members of the police. So it seems as if it's well coordinated. So the alleged killers, whether trigger pullers or in any way those who are accused persons, you will find that if there are more than 4, one of them will be either a former police officer or a current serving police officer. And that is a very worrying trend, because it tells you that even the police themselves, there are some rotten apples and potatoes within them who are part of this broader hitman industry in KwaZulu-Natal. So every time there will be an election in KwaZulu-Natal, but if you start from 2011, 2016, and now in 2019, there will always be these incidents of political violence. Not to say during other periods they are not there. We also report about cases daily whereby those who are involved in political activities are being attacked, they are being injured, or they are being killed.
So, Siphamandla, while we mention police who are actively playing a role in these political killings, we also have to bear in mind that we have heard incidents of police members being intimidated, where they've arrested culprits and their family members have been threatened. in order to allow that political killing to go unprosecuted. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. It's such a complex issue. The situation on the ground, as all three of you have been telling me, is tense. So warrants definitely to be spoken about more often in the next 6 weeks as we approach the 1st of November. Thank you very much, senior reporter Siphamandla Goge, coming to us from KZN. And we have also been speaking to whistleblower Thabiso Zulu. He is an ANC KZN activist.